Hi, welcome back to Tech Talks. I'm your host, Jack Bramwood, and this is the podcast where I speak to some of the brightest and most influential people in the tech industry in the UK. This week, I was sitting down with delivery director at Cprime, Lydia Hawthorn. We talked about everything from the complications of Agile delivery, the role of a delivery director, and how the Agile community has developed over time.
Delivery drew in from everywhere, and it was notoriously hard to get recognition as a delivery agent inside businesses because nobody could really tangibly say what it was that we did. But all we did know is if we weren't there, things fell apart.
For more information on this episode and Tech Talks, head over to tact-it.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the episode. Lydia, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, so who is Lydia?
So I'm Lydia Hawthorn. I'm delivery director at Cprime. I am day 3 in my new job. And prior to that, I had been head of product delivery at the UK Tote Group, the gambling brand, running an internal safe transformation there. Have really just been sort of padding out my experience of being an Agile transformation expert, I suppose, over the last 5 to 6 years, really.
And now you're obviously here today. We've got a new segment on the show, on the podcast.
Okay.
Obviously, our vision for Tact is we want to create a world where everyone gets the dream job. So I want you to do this for me.
Okay.
I want you to draw what you wanted to be when you grew up. And if you draw a delivery director, I'll be really cross because that's surely not what you want to be when you grow up.
I don't think any child grows up wanting to be a delivery director, but
I don't know. It's quite. Is that not what happens in the careers meetings when you're in primary school?
Primary school, probably not. It probably should. They're a lot more in demand than what most people want to be when they're a child. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
Actually. I really loved reading, and I felt like I had a lot of ideas. Mm-hmm. Some of them other people didn't particularly want to hear. I was one of these I was big into make-believe.
Okay.
And I would go through phases where I didn't want my parents to call me my real name. And I had this whiteboard outside my bedroom and it would say, "This week, my name is." And I watched a biopic movie about Sonny and Cher, and I was obsessed with their daughter because they'd called her Chastity.
Okay.
So for a solid month when I was 7, that's what I needed my parents to call me, nothing else, right? So bizarre. But it really was I had this world in my mind that I just felt was so vivid. And I'd tell stories and draw pictures and have sort of make-believe friends and games in the garden and all of this. And funnily enough, I had a school reunion recently and we'd done a time capsule. This tiny hand that I'm drawing. It's
a really good.
It is. This is very Quentin Blake of me. But anyway. And we had this time capsule, and in the time capsule, all of my friends from school, and this was 12 years ago, we left, had written when they said, "Oh, what will Lydia be when you get older?" And they all said, "Writer, please make sure you're writing stories." And it did make me have a little crisis of confidence that God, what if I've missed my calling? But I think that, now I use my imagination and my creativity in different ways and tend to look at problem solving in slightly from an out of the box perspective. And but that's really what I wanted to be. I wanted to write scripts. I went to university and did creative writing. And it was sort of from there that I wanted to create these magical worlds of just sort of whimsy. And I was very romanticized as a child, as in I was a very romantic child. I liked the idea of love stories and things like this. But that's how I saw my life going when I was 6.
Wow. Can I have a look at this? Can I show the camera?
Of course.
Maybe
I need to write my name on it.
Oh, yeah, so that
later if you do want her.
I've got a Lydia Hawthorn original.
If I see it on eBay, I'll be mad.
Wow. There you go. So where did you grow up?
I was an army brat. So
Okay.
I travelled all over. I was born in Oxford, quickly moved around the south a fair few times, made our way over to Germany. My dad was an officer, so got commissioned out of Sandhurst, and then just moved around really for the first 10 years of my life. And then I went to boarding school. So I went to boarding school in York, in one of the oldest schools in the world, actually. It was founded in 627. Guy Fawkes.
Sorry, 627?
Yeah.
There's not
another number before that. No, 627. And Guy Fawkes went there.
Right.
So on bonfire night, we never burnt a guy because you shouldn't burn an old boy. But it was a mixed school and it was in York City Centre. So it was very much like in the real world. It didn't feel sort of out in the middle of nowhere with nobody to socialise with. And my brother went there as well. And I loved it. Really, really suited me as a child, going to somewhere that had stability and consistency. And the majority of the boarders at the school were from army backgrounds as well. So we were all sort of in the same boat. And it's a very unique experience. It really isn't for everyone. But I felt like it was right for me. But my parents, are northern at heart. My dad's part German. I have a very sort of mutt-like background, and I don't really come from anywhere. So when I moved to Manchester when I was 21, this is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I'll have been here 10 years next summer. And Manchester really is now my home, and I made it that myself, off my own back. Not because I was told this is where you're from, but because I basically made Manchester adopt me as a Mancunian, despite the fact that I don't sound like one.
Yeah, you definitely don't.
No.
So why did you pick Manchester? What?
Well, I had been with my childhood boyfriend all through uni, and he'd been at Manchester. I'd been at Nottingham, and I'd spent most of my time going back and forth on the trains. And when I graduated, it was 2013. It was right sort of at the end of the last recession. And it was very much, I'd done English and creative writing, and I didn't want to be a teacher, and I didn't want to be a writer anymore. So, it was slim pickings. It very much felt like if you get a job, it doesn't matter what it is or where it is, you go. And I had gone to an assessment day at Pareto Law, and they had said they wanted to hire me, so they're a recruitment company specializing in business-to-business sales, graduates, and also sales training. And they place, business-to-business sales grads into Amex, Virgin Media, Marsh, all of these sorts of big businesses. But they said, no, we want you to come and work for us. And they tended to cherry pick from their assessment days, the people that they wanted to work for them. So I felt very complimented by it. And the fact that it was in Manchester sort of was a little bit less daunting because I knew the city a little. I had a couple of friends here who were doing masters who hadn't graduated yet. And I moved. I came back from traveling. I'd done a bit of time during the summer. I came back, I graduated, and I moved in like 3 days on the train on my own with like 8 bags. And that was it. Yeah. Never left.
Spur of the moment moved. It's worked out. So how did you go from Pareto Law, sales, recruitment, that sort of stuff, now to delivery director? How did you get there?
So I definitely fumbled around in the commercial space for a few years. Pareto was a bit of a baptism by fire, as a 21-year-old, never having been in a professional role before. But they taught you how to do it well. That was one thing. And the business acumen you got from working somewhere like that was huge. The exposure to big clients. And they took a great deal of pride in the work there. But it was very clear to me early on that it just didn't really suit me having this. Even though I'm a competitive person, I didn't like having the target over my head all the time. It gave me a great amount of anxiety, real imposter syndrome, constantly berating myself if I wasn't able to hit targets, things like that. So I moved into, but I didn't know more than sales at that point. So I moved into cybersecurity, forensic evidence gathering for legal proceedings. But I was still in more commercial-based roles, so sort of consultant roles, going out to clients because we were selling into law firms at that point, going into legal firms, speaking to the lawyers who are responsible for gathering the evidence. And nowadays there's so much electronic evidence. In the old days, it would be, okay, we've got big, document folders. Now it's terabytes of data on computers. So we would go in and we would forensically capture, and there was sort of the early days of e-disclosure guidelines, which is when the UK legal system said we need to find a way to document how to professionally and properly capture electronic evidence so that it can be, entered into court proceedings. In the same way that if, somebody had been murdered, you'd go to a scene and there'd be a way of forensically gathering blood samples, fingerprints, etc. So that's essentially what we were doing, but just for electronic evidence instead. And that was fascinating, but I was still just in the wrong type of role. And I was finding I would sell the contract to the client, and what I then wanted to do was carry on with the client and do the work and execute on what we'd contracted. And instead they got taken away by another team, and I was like, no, come back. I've spent all this time like building rapport with the client, understanding their needs. And at the end of the day, I just still had a target over my head, and all that mattered was that I hit that target. So I very quickly decided I took a bit of a pay cut, a bit of a step down, and I went and began a delivery manager role at a consultancy, a cybersecurity consultancy called MWR, which was just the most amazing place for me to work. It was a scale up at the time. They had a really exciting environment, lots of empowerment happening, lots of sort of space for people who had ideas, and they were phenomenal at their jobs. So it was a place I could learn from a lot of people how to do delivery well. And Shana Walker, who's now, VP, president of, she's really done incredibly in that business. But she was an amazing manager for me to see what it takes to be good at delivery. And it's that insatiable need to solve problems, this real drive and belief that there is no problem you cannot find a solution to. And to not really quit, to have that tenacity that really is involved in sales, but the outcome is different. They're trying to secure the sale. What I was trying to do is secure the solution, so that everybody feels like they won. And very quickly, I realized it was something that really lent into my skills. And then since then, I really started, I had an opportunity there to do a course. They said, do you want to do Prince 2 or do you want to do Agile? And I said, I do Agile because I could sense in the market it was more in demand. And it went from there. And I was, then I did my Agile PM, I did my Agile coaching. Then I started to specialize more and do SAFE. So I'm a SAFE program consultant and a release train engineer. And I've done all my qualifications there. And I just fell in love with transformation, really, and helping people make the changes that they needed to make so that they enjoyed their jobs more, really. It didn't feel like a long process at the time, but looking back now, I realized quite how much graft I had to do. And while all my other friends who'd stayed in sales were making like 14 grand a month bonuses, and I was back on like £34,000, it was hard because I was like, what have I done? Maybe if I just worked harder or grafted harder or been less weak, I could have hacked it in sales, but it just wasn't who I was.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. And I think the fact that you stuck with it, even though you weren't earning as much as your friends, even though it was loads of graft for very little reward at the time, it just shows that you were clearly very passionate about it, because someone who wasn't probably would have quit very, very quickly.
I'm sure. I realize that now, but at the time,
hindsight's great, isn't it?
Well, right. At the time, I felt very much like fish out of water.
And now recently started your new job as, like I said, 3 days in. Congrats, by the way, on the amazing new job. So Cprime, who are they? What have you been brought on to do?
Yeah, so Cprime are a specialist agile transformation consultancy, but they also have very strong departments around tooling and tech teams as well. Formerly in the UK, they operated as RadTac. And then there was an acquisition about 18 months to 2 years ago, and a US company called Cprime bought out RadTac. But when you go into the business, that RadTac mentality is still there in the sense that they've got the shared identity. It wasn't a big American monster coming to absorb a company and sort of lose all trace of where they started. So there's this, it really reminds me of MWR when I worked there, in the sense that they have very big growth targets, things that they want to do. They're very ambitious and very innovative. More recently, I mean, like I said, they specialize in agile transformations, SAFE, as well as other flavors of agile, but they have been doing great amounts of work supporting customers with the tooling that's required as well, because you can do an agile transformation, great, but if your infrastructure isn't there, you haven't got the right people as well. So Cprime Studios are a big part of that, is bringing the right people into your business and in a scalable way as well, rather than having to put all your eggs in one basket and hire permanently. And that plus the tooling, as well as then having the right people to help you mold your transformation, is that 360-degree capability that a lot of the consultancies don't necessarily have. Cprime also have a really amazing model, which is one of the reasons that I felt so confident going there, is they only are paid on results. So at the beginning of an engagement, they'll go to a client and say, what do you want to happen? What are your markers of success? What would we need to see the dial turning on for us to say that, prove to you that we've done what we came here to do? And it's only when they then deliver that they are paid. So whereas a lot of consultancies will make you pay up front, like a retainer, and they'll just draw down off of that. So yeah, for me to go back into consultancy, it needed to be somewhere that was really good at their job. I wasn't interested in just going to one of the big four. I really needed somewhere that I would have hired to do work for me when I was in-house. Yeah, and that's what I felt when I found Cprime.
And what is your job that you come out to do?
So delivery director role is really about bringing together delivery, the solution, which is in this case the agile transformation or the tooling or the teams, and then the commercial aspect. So it's a really interesting role for me. It literally felt, when I read the job description, like they'd gone through my LinkedIn and gone, yeah, we need someone with commercial background and acumen. We need somebody who's done hardcore delivery roles before in the past and client-facing work. And we need someone who knows about agile transformation and has a deep appreciation for agile and is an agilist in themselves. And that's essentially, it's bringing that holy trinity together. And the delivery director is at the center of that, to make sure that the commercial teams are talking to the solutions teams, to talking to the delivery teams. Because too often, especially in consultancy, where sometimes it can be less tangible than, say, a software product where you're selling licenses, is if those people aren't connected, your commercial team is out there potentially selling something that your solutions team would never commit to, or that the delivery team, they're promising like timelines and lead times that the delivery team would say are completely unrealistic. So unless those three areas are working very cohesively towards customer success, you can find silos are starting to happen and breakdown of communication happens, and you're robbing yourself really of opportunities because you also don't see where you could upsell, cross-sell, or continue to support the client further than you already are doing.
Salesperson coming out in you.
I know, you see, it's still there after all these years.
Obviously been in agile delivery for how long now?
Oh gosh, so 8 years.
Have you seen it change from when you started to now?
I think what's great, and I was telling you earlier, I was at an event last night, one of the deliver sessions at the BBC. I was talking there, and what's been amazing is seeing how the community has developed, because 8 years ago you'd go to a meetup and yes, you might be talking about agile, but the people there were sort of indirectly responsible for advocating for agile inside their businesses, not explicitly. And so now you have this appreciation for what is actually required to affect change inside businesses and really embed true business agility. You have a bigger community of people whose job that is very specifically, it's called out in their remit and they don't do anything else. Whereas back in the day, you'd have a project manager and they were being asked to maybe look at agile, maybe do some waterfall, maybe they had their Prince 2. It was much more generalist. Yeah, you see now in the increase in numbers of jobs listed for Scrum Masters or Agile delivery managers or Agile coaches. I mean, they've skyrocketed over the last 8 years. So I think the industry in general has started to see the value at calling those sorts of roles out, because the other thing is that delivery tended to be full of people that sort of landed there from elsewhere, like me, where I didn't want to do sales, but I was good at client-facing stuff. I was really driven, but I didn't want to be on a target. You find people come in from who are ex-techies who have done, QA, or they've been developers, but they just preferred something that's a little bit more people-based. Delivery drew in from everywhere, and it was notoriously hard to get recognition as a delivery agent inside businesses because nobody could really tangibly say what it was that we did. But all we did know is if we weren't there, things fell apart. And it's because delivery is the glue that holds everything together. It's the thing that keeps the train on the track, makes sure everyone's okay. And that's changed massively in the last few years, in that awareness of the importance of the role.
And it's probably evident with different roles within tech. I mean, definitely agile delivery, definitely like Scrum Master, definitely like DevOps, like these roles that have traditionally just been part of another person's role are now individual roles because they see the importance of.
And I think we might even see a trend in the next few years as we go through an economic downturn, because businesses aren't going to be able to hire like they used to. They're not going to have the same amount of investment. They're going to be curtailing their costs to protect the overall, pipeline and roadmap of their business. You're going to find people having to call into question, what do we do when we can't just hire more people?
Sure.
And I think that compared to last time, which was driven by a lack of awareness of what delivery is, I think now we're in a better position to, in a very smart, intelligent way, okay, how do we do more with the same? How do we find the right people in the business who are able to advocate Agile without it needing to be a burden to them? Not because we want to give them a load more work, but because that's really when you shift the mindset and culture of a business to being Agile with a big A. There's so many companies out there now who are trying to say they're Agile, but they're Agile in name only and nothing else. And it's because they haven't got the champions and the advocates inside areas of the business that aren't the Agile delivery managers.
Yeah.
And so the Agile delivery managers are there slogging every day, trying to connect people with the mindset and the values. And they're not able to because there was no investment made at making agility everybody's responsibility. If you asked in a business, okay, we need everybody to be responsible for picking up rubbish, you never have to say that to anybody, right? Because people just do it. You wouldn't ever come into an office and there's just rubbish everywhere because they're like, oh, well, it's that team's job to do it. It's exactly the same with Agile, and it's there's a certain amount of upkeep that can only happen when everybody's looking out for it. So I think that we'll see a little bit of a movement towards businesses calling that out, because that's something that they can chip away at slowly without having to spend too much money, because it's not about hiring new people or paying for very expensive tooling.
You mentioned a couple there, but any other common pitfalls that you see when within agile delivery?
Plenty.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many anti-patterns that people they don't necessarily do on purpose.
Sure.
But I think it can be a slippery slope, especially in less mature agile settings. And I hate actually the word mature and immature when we describe the level of adoption of an agile implementation, because it immediately makes nobody wants to be called immature, right? Nobody. But when there is just some people who are more early on, or potentially they've gone through a transformation that seems like they've taken a long time but not gained much, it's usually because the basics are missing. And that's one thing as well. I do think with the approach to Agile and the flavors of Agile we have, that things have seemingly only been getting more complicated with Agile. And the beauty of Agile to begin with was it was really bloody simple, and it was easy for anybody to do themselves originally. And over time, these new frameworks have come in, these new ways of working have come in, and everybody has an opinion, and everything seems so complicated. And it's what puts people off from doing it well, because they look at a really advanced implementation and say, well, only when we're doing that will we be agile. And they forget all about the basics. So you'll go in somewhere and they're trying to adopt SAFe, like a scaled agile framework, which is meant when you've got sort of 70 developers-ish, right? Plus. And they're not even running daily stand-ups. And honestly, that happens more than you would think. And it's because to them, the stand-up is so insignificant, because they're comparing it to the full-scaled implementation. And of course, it will never stand up next to that, because this feels really big. But really, this is where the good habits are formed. This is where true agile mindset, agile leadership is formed, because it's the basics. So I do think we're going to start to see having to revisit some of that and sort of fill in the gaps for people before they can, and sort of say, listen, calm down. You'll get to there. Everyone can't just go and do the Spotify model tomorrow.
Sure.
But they want to, because they think that's what being agile is. And it's a whole feature benefit thing. I often think people are saying, I have the features of an agile implementation. not like story features or like product features. I mean, I'm doing stand-ups, I'm doing retros, I'm doing this. But okay, but do you and the rest of the business understand the benefit that it adds? Because if you don't, those features are very easy to get rid of. If you don't understand the importance of a retro and what it does and the agent of change that it creates, why do it? And so very quickly, it's easy to sort of see this diminishing value of Agile because the basics aren't being done.
As a business owner or anyone who's in charge of change within a business, you're saying there's a massive education piece there first and foremost before even...
I think so. And I also think people need to health check more. I think so many assumptions are made, especially when trying to transform existing teams, because the teams are there going, well, we've been operating without this for however long. And yeah, we have our problems, but doesn't everyone? And we're not trying to get to perfect. So what's wrong with how we're doing it now? Where's the incentive for them to change? And you've taken the opportunity from yourself if you don't health check first, because the health check, it adds objectivity. The team, otherwise, they hear the delivery manager or the head of delivery or whoever it might be telling them essentially, yeah, I know you guys think that you've been doing a really good job, but you haven't. And that's why we're making you change. You're then the villain. And you've taken away their ability to be on board and to be your ally. So really the health check is there to add in the objectivity, because the health check they fill out. And all of a sudden, instead of you coming in and going, your JIRA boards aren't well organized enough, you haven't got a good approach to releasing, your definition of ready isn't right, you're saying to them, okay, this is what you've told me. This isn't me telling you. You've examined the health of this team and identified these areas. So now that we have that information, where do we start? You want to start either chipping away at something that is going to really shift the dial the most, but might take a long time. And at the same time, look at what is your low-hanging fruit, the thing that's really quick to fix, like running daily stand-ups, like making sure you've got a product backlog. And you'll quickly then start to build the morale around the transformation, because the quick wins are the little hits of dopamine that go like, oh, we did it, ding. And give them faith as well that it is possible to affect change and feel the benefit. And that's what gives people the stamina for the larger, more complex part of the transformation, because those feel so clunky. It feels so heavy, so hard. It's like climbing Everest. And you need people to believe that they can do it, to allow them to be on board with your transformation train.
You can just tell when you're speaking to someone who's very, very passionate about something. And I think for you, what is it you are passionate about? Is it you're passionate about transformation, about Agile, about change? What is it in particular that's really like kind of got hold of you here?
Yeah, I personally think that everyone deserves to feel like they're winning every day at their job. I hate having interactions with people where I know they've left that interaction feeling like they lost something, lost an opportunity, lost face, lost ground, lost part of their beliefs. You know, it doesn't sit well with me. I want to leave every interaction they want to feel like they won, and I want to feel like I won, and the other people want to feel like they won. It's diplomacy at its finest when you can do that, because it's not that they got exactly what they went in wanting. There's a difference. It's not that they went in with a list of things and then came out with that list, but it's that they left, regardless of what they got off the list, they felt like they won. And for me, Agile transformation is one of those times that even if people don't realize at the time, once they are working in a business that is Agile and has an Agile mindset and has Agile leadership, truly the shift, the change is night and day. It's like going from being in a complete pressure cooker to going in somewhere that you feel heard, seen, appreciated. You have this natural desire to do your job well, not because of how much money you're getting paid, although of course we want to remunerate people properly, and there's more that people could do there as well. But we have really lost this sense of loyalty and passion for your product and for your customer. And time again, we go in, I sit in offices and I hear people talk about, oh, well, we need to release more and we need this feature and we need that. And where's the client? Where's the customer? Like, Agile was built to be customer centric, to be client centric. Design thinking, product-led innovation, they all should have the customer at the heart of it. And too often people are interested in other metrics. It's a shame. But I do think it's because there's this disconnect between the people doing the work and who they're doing the work for. And I mean, I could talk for days about why that is, but it's something that businesses need to be aware of. And I think that's why I love this industry so much, because I really have seen it work. And I love that when people get it, It's really special.
Well, look, incredibly insightful, and I'm conscious of time because, like I said, we could talk about this for ages. And the great thing is, you're doing a lot of events at the minute, a lot of public speaking stuff. You got podcast after podcast, which makes me feel a bit not very special. But so there's going to be loads of stuff around in more depth around this sort of stuff. Look, a question I always like to kind of wrap up with is, say today was your last day on Earth. Yeah. And apart from coming on this podcast, obviously, and spending time with Magnus and Graham, what would you be doing?
Be in water.
Okay.
Somewhere. Whoa. I mean, if I could fly anywhere and go and be in water, I'd hopefully be in water somewhere hot. But if I couldn't be, I'd be in water somewhere cold even. Water for me is like calm, it's safe, it actually is. So my head is an incredibly loud, busy place.
Okay.
And quite stressful, actually, to be inside my head sometimes. And being even near water, looking at water, seeing water, it calms me immediately. So I don't have a lot of that in Manchester. That's the only thing. That's the only downside to the city, in my eyes, is there's not enough water.
There's a canal right there.
Yeah, but come on. I need flowing water. I need it
that
to
flows.
feel. I need it to feel in some way calming. The canal doesn't really spark feelings of calm. But I will say, on a great sunset, the canal is beautiful.
Absolutely.
But I need to see, or rivers, I need to hear the rushing of the water. And that's for me is my happy place. So yeah, that would be what I would do with my last day on Earth.
Yeah, I think you're being fussy around the kind of bodies of water that you're going after, but personally. But amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. It's always great seeing you. Yeah. And obviously, I think when this podcast comes out, you'll be well into your time at Cprime, but really excited to see how the next 6 to 12 months pans out for Lydia.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll catch you on the next one.